Alice hid in the corner, watching her drunk father, feeling very scared. Her father threw away her doll and unbuckled his belt, preparing to beat her, but her mother, Mary, walked in and stopped him. She gave the man $50,000 and said, "From now on, Alice will stay with me." Later, Mary took Alice to the Smith house. She told the young boy, David Smith, "From now on, Alice will be your sister." But David pushed Alice away and said, "I don't have a sister." Years later, David and Alice both grew up. He untied his tie, pushed her onto the bed, and said, "I told you back then, I don't have a sister." He stripped off her shirt and leaned close to her shoulder. He suddenly smiled, stood up, and prepared to leave, but Alice jumped onto his back and bit his neck. He ordered her to get off, but she didn't listen. David's father walked in and happened to witness the scene, questioning what they were doing. Alice was so sad when she learned that David was about to marry his fiancée Rose. She picked up the broken glass from the floor and cut herself. David asked her if she was hurt, and she told him her foot was bleeding. He wanted to go get the first aid kit, but she tightly hugged him from behind and said, "Brother, I want to sleep with you." He picked her up to treat her injury and then sat by her bed, keeping her company as she fell asleep. Alice dreamt again. In her dream, David's hand was accidentally cut by broken glass and she licked his wound. When she woke up, the maid told her that David's fiancée, Rose, had arrived. Rose came to discuss the wedding plans with David, but he seemed indifferent. Rose linked her arm with his, but he immediately shook her off. Just then, he saw Alice lying on the couch, and she smiled, calling out, "Brother," to him. He immediately put a coat over her. Rose felt jealous and reached out to touch David, but Alice angrily pushed her to the ground. David's father saw this and scolded Alice, "You have no manners. Rose is your future sister-in-law." He ordered Alice to help Rose up, but Alice refused. David comforted her by patting her head, but she bluntly told him she didn't want him to marry another woman. David's father said to him, "Alice is just your toy. Why are you indulging her so much?" Alice was even more upset upon hearing this and ran out crying. But David stopped her, gently touched her face, and apologized to her. She cried and said, "If you marry someone else, I don't want you anymore." She pushed David away, but he hoisted her onto his shoulder, slapped her bottom, and warned her not to say such things again. Rose witnessed this. She was consumed by jealousy and couldn't help but clench her fists. Alice had nightmare again, dreaming that her father was beating her while drunk. She woke up from the nightmare, and Dr. Bruce gently comforted her, telling her that all the unpleasant things were over. He patted her head and handed her some candies, which she accepted with a smile. When she got home, Alice saw her brother David sleeping on the sofa. So she sat on his lap, took off his glasses, and gently touched his face. She wanted to kiss him, but he suddenly opened his eyes. The next day, David accompanied Rose to try on wedding dresses, but he ran into Alice at the bridal shop, who was also trying on a dress. She asked David, "Do I look good in this wedding dress?" He wanted to leave, but she hugged him tightly and quietly stroked his body. He could no longer control himself and turned around, taking off his shirt right in front of her. She shyly closed her eyes, but he lifted her chin. Just then, the salesperson pulled back the curtain and saw David's back. She quickly closed the curtain and apologized to him. David pressed Alice against the table, inching closer to her. Rose called his name from outside the curtain, but he ordered her to get lost. He slowly leaned in and kissed Alice on the neck, but Rose suddenly burst in and saw the scene. Rose was furious and stepped forward to slap Alice, but David stopped her. He warned Rose, "Don't cross my line. If Alice gets hurt, your whole family will pay the price." With that, he took Alice and left. Rose told Alice, "You and David are siblings. You can never be lovers." Alice smashed the wine glass, cutting her wrist with the broken shards, and then burst into tears. David hurried over and carried Alice back to the room. Alice smiled at Rose from his embrace, taunting her. After treating Alice's wound, David told her, "I have to marry Rose. It's a business alliance." Alice immediately became agitated and tried to break free from his embrace. But he covered her eyes with his hand, kissed her wrist and shoulder, and then nibbled on her earlobe. He wanted her to promise not to harm herself again, or else it would break his heart. David's father told him that the wedding with Rose had to be moved up because he wanted the business partnership between the two families to be finalized quickly. Alice overheard this and collapsed in despair. She thought of Dr. Bruce, who had once told her he was her best friend, so she decided to confide in him. She cried uncontrollably, but slowly fell asleep in Bruce's gentle embrace. Later, Bruce carried her back to her house, but they ran into David. David was filled with jealousy and didn't allow Bruce to touch her. But Bruce wasn't intimidated and accused David of failing to protect Alice. He laid Alice down on the couch and told David, "Since you can't protect her, I'll be the one to do it from now on." David was furious and slammed his fist on the table. He would never allow Alice to be taken away by another man. The next day, Alice was about to go out with Bruce when David grabbed her and covered her mouth. Alice said, "As long as you break off the engagement with Rose, I will stay by your side obediently." David remained silent. Alice tried to leave, but he held onto her hand tightly. In front of Bruce, he picked Alice up and carried her back to the room. Then he threw her into the bathtub. She wanted to escape, but he tightly held her in his arms and said, "Let's calm down together." After saying that, he submerged both of them into the water. As he dried her hair, she leaned in and kissed his Adam's apple, causing him to freeze in place. She flirted with him by his ear, and in response, he pushed her onto the bed and kissed her. David suddenly woke up from the dream, realizing that everything that had just happened was just a dream. He cursed himself for having such impure thoughts. Bruce bought a new teddy bear for Alice and deliberately provoked David, saying, "The teddy bear can be replaced, and the people around her can be replaced too." David was so furious. He raised his fist, ready to punch Bruce, but Alice stopped him. David took her away, pushed her onto the table, and said, "I won't allow any other man to be with you because I love you." She wanted to retort, but he kissed her lips. Panicked, she pushed him away and asked, "Are you kissing me?" David replied, "You can only be my woman." After saying that, he kissed her again. This time, Alice didn't resist and kissed him back passionately. While Alice was playing the cello, her finger was accidentally cut by the strings. David took her bleeding finger into his mouth, then hugged her and comforted her softly. She looked up at him and asked, "Brother, will you marry me?" He answered, "I'm sorry, I can't." He leaned down to kiss her, but she pulled away. She said to him, "From now on, my matters have nothing to do with you." That night, while David was sleeping, Alice whispered in his ear. He opened his eyes and asked what she was doing. At that moment, she was sitting on top of him, handcuffing him, making him unable to move. She unbuttoned her shirt, took off her bra, and slowly bent down to lick his chin with her tongue. David tried to calm her down, but she didn't listen and kissed him on the lips. David suddenly woke up from the dream. The entire event had been just a dream. He heard Alice talking on the phone with Bruce and immediately ran over to throw her phone away. She tried to pick it up, but he picked her up and carried her to the stairs. Alice was a bit frightened and ordered him to let go. David replied, "I can let go, but you must promise me to stay away from Bruce." Rose happened to witness the scene and questioned what they were doing. She angrily shoved Alice to the ground, but David pushed Rose aside and ordered her to leave. He helped Alice up and told Rose, "I announced that I'm breaking off the engagement with you." Rose tried to persuade him to reconsider, warning of serious consequences, but he didn't hesitate and carried Alice away. David handcuffed Alice to the bed and took off his tie, using it to blindfold her. He pinched her chin and said, "You didn't listen to me, so I'm going to punish you." He opened her shirt with his mouth and used a feather to tickle her. She struggled and begged him to stop, but he kept going. She said, "I was wrong. I will obediently listen to you in the future." He leaned down to kiss her belly, and she blushed with embarrassment. Then, David took off her blindfold and said, "Since you're so obedient, I'll reward you." She asked him what the reward was, and he slowly leaned in and kissed her. The next morning, David kissed Alice at the dining table. She was afraid of being seen by others, so she pushed him away and tried to escape. But he hugged her from behind and kissed her again. Alice accidentally knocked over a bottle of red wine on the cabinet, and the sound alarmed David's father, who was outside the door. Although David knew his father was just outside, he didn't panic and continued to kiss Alice. When his father opened the door and entered, David and Alice immediately stopped, pretending as if nothing had happened. They sat down to eat with his father, but under the table, they secretly held hands and flirted. David's father suddenly received a call from Rose's father, learning that David had already broken off the engagement. He was furious and opposed his son's decision. David said, "Rose hit Alice. I can't tolerate that." His father told him, "I spent $50,000 to buy Alice. She's just your toy. If you defy me, I'll make her disappear." David had no choice but to meet Rose and apologize. Just then, Alice called him, and he tried to answer the phone, but Rose threw his phone into the tea. Alice slowly walked toward them and smashed the wine glass in her hand. David hugged her, trying to explain, but she didn't want to listen. Bruce stopped David, but David punched him. Alice rushed in to protect Bruce and said, "From now on, Bruce is my boyfriend. Brother, please show some self-respect." After saying that, she turned and left with Bruce. Due to David losing control of his emotions, his father ordered the bodyguards to beat him up. Bruce told David's father, "I'm now the project manager of Rose's family company. If you marry Alice to me, we'll become one family, and I'll help you secure business deals with the Rose family." Although David strongly opposed, his father accepted Bruce's suggestion. That night, David hugged Alice from behind and said, "I miss you so much." She struggled, but he kissed her forcefully and pushed her down onto the sofa, continuing the passionate kiss. He cried, pleading for her not to leave him, but she pushed him away with all her strength. Although Alice pretended to accept Bruce's proposal, she was only using him to escape the Smith family. When she visited Bruce's house, she accidentally discovered a large whiteboard covered by a blanket in his room. She uncovered the blanket and saw what was written on the whiteboard, which shocked her. The board was filled with background information on the Smith family members, including Alice, David, and his father. Alice hurriedly took out her phone to take pictures of the contents, but Bruce suddenly covered her mouth from behind. He tied her hands and feet, then explained why he sought revenge against the Smith family. Bruce and David were actually half-brothers, sharing the same father. Bruce's mother had been a maid and secretly gave birth to him, so his father never knew of his existence. Bruce hated and envied David, and he planned to take everything David had, including Alice. Bruce tightly embraced Alice, but David arrived and pushed him onto the sofa, beating him up. He untied Alice and told her, "To me, you're more important than the Smith family." Just as David was about to leave with Alice, Bruce fired a shot at him. Alice grabbed a metal ornament from the table and knocked Bruce unconscious. She hugged David and begged him to hold on and not lose consciousness. When David woke up, he found that Alice was gone. His father told him, "You and Alice can never be together. You must marry Rose immediately. If you don't agree to marry her, I'll kill Alice." David panicked and grabbed his father's hand, begging him not to hurt Alice, and promised to marry Rose the next day. Rose slapped Alice, saying, "Your brother is marrying me tomorrow." Alice thought David had abandoned her, and she was heartbroken. The next day, Bruce pointed a gun at Rose to threaten David's father into releasing Alice. When David arrived, Bruce suddenly became emotional and scolded him for not protecting Alice properly. David's father took advantage of Bruce's distraction and shot him. The severely injured Bruce slowly crawled toward Alice, recalling the first time he met her, when she comforted him by giving him a candy. David's father kicked Bruce, and Alice cried out, "Do you know who he is? He's your son." David's father was shocked, deeply regretful, but Bruce had already died from blood loss. David picked up Alice and told his father, "I voluntarily give up all my inheritance rights to the Smith family because I only want to be with Alice." Despite Rose's strong objections, he carried Alice away. Several months later, David and Alice had already started a new life together. He bought her a new teddy bear. She found a ring on the bear and was surprised. David knelt down on one knee and proposed to her, and she smiled and accepted. He put the ring on her finger and kissed her deeply.